I think that our 20s are this incredible period in our lives because the decisions that we make have so much impact on where we end up in life. And so I refer to this as the rocket years, because when you're in your 20s, you're a rocket that has just taken off. And any change in your flight path in those years doesn't really feel like a big deal at the time, whether you're dating this guy or that guy or quitting a job spontaneously. None of that seems like that big a deal at the time. But what we know from the social science is that it can have a huge impact on whether you land on the moon or Mars. So I thought that was a really apt analogy for our 20s, and I really think that our 20s are our rocket years. I was really fascinated by the latest research about how our brains develop. And what we know now is that our brains, are forming throughout our childhood, and they basically solidify at the age of about 25. And that actually changes the course of our lives, because it's actually a lot easier to develop habits until the age of 25, and it becomes harder and harder to develop new habits after that. And I think that is such an interesting and an empowering statistic, because it can inform, what we do with those years, and it can also help us as we get older, because some things become harder for us to do, and it's good to know that that we are dealing with some essentially like biochemistry in our brains, right? That's impeding the process. So I actually wrote this book in a way for myself. I wrote this book when I basically had the idea for this book in my early 30s. It was 7 p.m. on a Wednesday night, and I had just, gone through the 2-hour ordeal of putting my daughter to bed, and I looked around at my life, and I noticed that so many aspects of my life had been formed already. So I had recently gotten married. I had a new baby. I was doing a job that I loved and that I'd been doing for several years. It looked like it was going to be the job that I was going to be in for the long haul. And I couldn't figure out how I had created this life that I now have. I love my life, but I couldn't figure out exactly when I had made all the decisions that had basically created my life story. And so my husband is a political scientist, and he spends his life surrounded by data. And so he told me, you know what, Liz, we can actually sit down and answer some of these questions. And so that got me started on this journey where I began exploring the big decisions that I made in my 20s, and how they have shaped the life that I have, and how they will continue to play out in the decades to come. So my book is really broken up into 3 overarching sections. In the first part, I look at ourselves and basically our work-life balance, right? So I look at the biggest thing that most people will think about, throughout their 20s is their career. And so I spent a lot of time thinking about how one creates, a career for themselves that will sort of inform how they spend most of their time for the rest of their life. But I also combine that with the other things that form our daily life. So things like, our other passions and our fitness habits, right? Because all of those, the data shows us that those 2 things are related, right? The career part and the other parts of our life that help us become more productive and help us create balance in our life. So that's one chunk of the book. The second chunk has to do with our relationship with other people. So that has to do with, finding a life partner, creating a family, and creating a network of friends that for many people are a kind of family. And the last part of the book really relates to our relationship with other institutions in society. So I look at faith, and I also look at politics, because that's how we connect with other institutions around us.